Have you ever noticed how online poker never really ends? It's not like a poker night with the guys where there's a final hand, somebody actually wins the pot, someone gets called out for a terrible play, promises revenge next month, then chairs start moving, chips go back in the case, people head home, and your nervous system actually gets the signal, we're done here. Online, that moment never comes. It's 1:30 in the morning, your laptop is still open, the room is quiet, maybe the only light is the screen reflecting back at you, and you're telling yourself, just one more hand. And what's wild is you don't even feel tired. You feel locked in. Your brain is fully engaged while your body almost disappears. And what most men don't realize is that online poker is activating many of the exact same brain circuits involved in scrolling, pornography, gambling, and hypersexual social media use. The dangerous part isn't really the money. It's what the game starts teaching your brain and your nervous system to crave. This episode is brought to you by my HarperCollins published book, Mind Over Explicit Matter. Learn how artificial stimulation miswires your brain and what you can do to rewire it back to purpose, intimacy, and connection. Go to drtrishleigh.com/book. Welcome back to the podcast with me, Dr. Trish Leigh, cognitive neuroscientist, where we are going to talk about how the world of modern digital overstimulation absolutely hijacks the reward system in your brain. So today we're going to venture out a little bit because whether it's gambling, scrolling, gaming, pornography proper, as I call it, explicit matter of all kinds, including hypersexual social media, that's a mouthful, the brain does not separate these experiences the way we think it does. Underneath all of them are the same dopamine-driven loops. These loops, in fact, are shaping your attention, anxiety, arousal, motivation, and ultimately the way that you experience real life. So, if you're interested in reclaiming your focus, drive, intimacy, and honestly your true purpose in a world that is designed to fragment your attention, well, my friend, you are in the right place. So grab a coffee and let's do it. Okay, you know in the movie Rounders, there's this energy it captures, the seduction of the underground poker world, the feeling that if you just stay in the game long enough, you can outplay everyone. Matt Damon's character isn't really just chasing money. He's chasing identity. He's chasing the feeling of being that guy at the table, the guy who wins, the one who knows something other people don't know, and frankly, the one who's in control. Honestly, this is where the shift happened culturally, because back then, that was hard to access. There were underground games, back rooms, real people, real risk. It was basically left for the mafia, right? There was friction. You had to find the game, know somebody's cousin to get the address, sit across from real humans, actually feel the stakes of it in your body. And eventually, you left. Now that entire experience has been compressed and digitized. No friction, no barrier to entry, no stopping cue at the end. You don't enter the game anymore. The game is just always there. And this is where it lines up with what Andrew Huberman talks about regarding dopamine and reward prediction. Your brain is constantly tracking not just the reward itself, but the possibility of reward, the maybe. And that anticipation is often more powerful than the reward itself. The moment before the cards flip, before the river, before you know, that's where the system lights up. Because in that moment, you are not experiencing the outcome itself. You are experiencing desire. And honestly, this is why online poker belongs in the same conversation as scrolling, gaming, sports betting, explicit matter, sexualized social media, and of course, pornography proper. On the surface, they look different, but underneath, they are training the exact same circuitry in the brain. Novelty, anticipation, uncertainty, variable reward, and dopamine hits delivered quickly enough to keep the brain chasing. In poker, it's the next hand. In scrolling, it's the next video. In pornography or hypersexual content, it's the next image, the next body, the next fantasy, the next hit. Different doorway, same hijack. And the algorithm does not care whether it's poker, pornography, gambling, rage bait, or scrolling. Its job is the same. Keep your nervous system engaged long enough to monetize your attention. That's why they call it an attention economy. This is why something that the great Napoleon Hill said hits differently here. Desire is the starting point of all achievement. But what happens when desire gets attached to something that never fully satisfies it? Because online poker doesn't just give you wins. It gives you almost wins, near misses and close calls, moments where you thought you had it. And those moments, they are incredibly powerful neurologically, especially because the brain doesn't just respond to reward. It responds to uncertainty around reward. That is what keeps the system activated. That is what keeps dopamine elevated. Not because you lost, but because you almost didn't. So the stakes quietly ratchet up internally for the next moment. And this is the part that almost nobody talks about. Testosterone doesn't just increase when men win. It increases during competition itself. It increases especially in anticipation of competition. So every time you sit down at that table, even a digital one, your brain says this to you. This matters. This is status. This is something I can win. And even if logically you know it's just numbers on a screen, your nervous system does not process it that way. It processes it as survival relevant. And this is why gambling, pornography, hypersexual social media, and compulsive scrolling can start blending together neurologically in men. Because underneath all of them is the same pursuit: stimulation, anticipation, status, conquest, novelty, arousal. The brain starts learning that fast dopamine equals important. Fast dopamine equals importance. Fast stimulation equals vitality. Constant engagement means survival. Or more accurately, the brain starts confusing hyperstimulation with vitality. And this is why many men today feel simultaneously overstimulated and underpowered. Their reward system is constantly activated, but their real world drive, focus, intimacy, motivation, and purpose, they slowly start collapsing underneath it because the nervous system was never designed to live in an endless loop of artificial intensity. And this is why some men can feel more emotionally activated by a poker hand or a sports bet or even a sexualized reel than from sitting across from a real woman who actually loves them. It's not because they're bad men. It's because the reward system has been hijacked by dopamine and conditioned to respond more strongly to novelty, uncertainty, and digital arousal than to those steadier rhythms of real connection. So now you've got dopamine driving the loop, testosterone reinforcing the competition, anticipation keeping the nervous system activated, and no real endpoint in sight. No neurophysiological reset. No signal that says enough. Just another hand, another scroll, another click, another hit. And over time, this is where the real shift happens, because real life, it does not operate like that. Real relationships do not deliver, I don't need to tell you this, endless novelty every 3 seconds. Real work does not give you instant high stimulation feedback. Real purpose requires patience, consistency, effort before you get the reward. And compared to what the brain has now been conditioned to expect from the screen, real life can start feeling slow. It can't compete. It feels flat and understimulating, which is why you hear Huberman emphasize that when the brain gets used to high frequency reward cycles, it starts to down-regulate. Down-regulation in the response to normal life is what occurs. And that sounds technical, but what it actually feels like is this. Things that used to feel meaningful to you don't hit the same anymore. So you sit down to do your work and you cannot get started. You're with people, but you're not fully present. You try to focus on something real that you might even care about, and your brain keeps drifting somewhere else. It's not because you don't care. It is single-handedly because your brain has been trained to expect faster feedback, higher stimulation, more artificial intensity. And this is where people get confused because they think it's a motivation problem or they think it might be a discipline problem. It's not. It is conditioning. Your brain has literally adjusted its baseline for what counts as rewarding. So now the same things that used to feel good to you, like progress, connection, real world intimacy with a partner, building something over time, do not create the same signal anymore. So over time, you subtly start orienting your life around the environments that do give you that signal. The fast ones, the uncertain ones, the hyperstimulating ones. Not because you consciously chose them, but because your nervous system was trained to prefer them. And this is where it really flips. Now, remember that old poker night where the game actually ended, chairs moving, chips going back in the case, guys laughing about the terrible play and saying that they'll get each other next time? Remember back when your system got a signal, we are done, night over, game over? Online, you never really get that signal, so your brain never fully resets. It just stays in that loop constantly. So this isn't really about poker. It's about what your brain starts defining as winning. Because if winning becomes fast, uncertain, constant stimulation, then anything requiring patience starts to feel like losing. That, my friend, is the true danger of the dopamine hijack happening right now through screens in all kinds of ways. The brain starts learning that stimulation equals importance. Uncertainty is an opportunity. Constant novelty equals meaning. And the nervous system gets trained to chase instead of connect. Your brain gets trained to consume instead of create, to seek those hits instead of building purpose in your real life. So the real question is not, should I stop playing poker? The real question is, what is this teaching my brain to chase? And it's to realize that these are different hijacks that are all in the same category, dopamine hijack. Because whatever you train your brain on long enough, it starts to believe that this is what matters. And if your brain has been conditioned by high dopamine stimulation long enough, you may not need more discipline alone. You may need a different brain state entirely. That's why I always say, you can't fix what you can't see. A brain map shows you where to start. Okay, always remember, control your brain or it will in fact control you. I'll see you next time.